Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am here to discuss EU Masters once again, and we have the quarterfinals on Tuesday and Wednesday. In some other exciting news, I figured out how to hide the top and bottom toolbar in the screen share, and I think I figured out a way to get the volume a little bit louder for you until I'm able to get a legitimate microphone. So thank you for bearing with me. All right. The big change this week is, well, we have a two-game slate again on Tuesday and Wednesday, but the big change is that these are now best of three series instead of the best of one we saw last week. Um, the two-game slates are a little nutty. Variants can just throw everything out of whack, but I am hopeful that with these three-game slates, the variance is a bit more subdued. We see some results that fall closer to the true mean or average. So let's jump into this. The first match is Mouse Sports and Rogue at noon Eastern Time, followed by LDLC and BTXL at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Uh, at the time I'm recording this video, we do not have any lines up from Bovada or Pinnacle. That's why you don't see a number in the implied win percentage column here. That's why we also do not have implied kill totals for the matches or for the teams. But um, that's not really a big deal because I can pretty much tell you where these lines are probably going to end up. Mouse Sports is, one of the bigger favorites in this tournament. They've looked really strong so far. I believe they only have one loss. So they're going to be the favorite in this first match by a good margin. I'm thinking the implied win percentage is going to end up being somewhere in the neighborhood of 65% or so. So yeah, Mouse are going to be chalk, and rightfully so. They've looked very good thus far. The LDLC and BTXL match, I expect that to be about a coin flip. One interesting thing is that DK obviously released the pricing already. As I've mentioned in the past, typically DK sets the pricing based on the implied win odds for each team. The higher implied win odds, the higher the salaries for the players on that team. They did set the LDLC salaries higher than BTXL in this slate, so it'll be interesting to see where that line comes in. If it is a true 50-50 or if BTXL is a slight favorite, then we've got a little bit of inherent value there in BTXL because their players are going to be more affordable even if they do end up being the favorite. And I actually do like BTXL in that series anyway, so more on that in a moment. All right, as far as this Mouse Sports and Rogue matchup, uh, like I said, Mouse Sports are going to be chalk, but I'm leaning towards eating that chalk. Now, obviously, if you're in a large field tournament or multi-entering, there's probably going to be some merit in some rogue stacks just because I think they're going to go at pretty low ownership. Low ownership for a two-game slate, that is. So maybe 10, 15% or something like that. So I am willing to eat the chalk on Mouse Sports. I just think that they come from the superior league with a higher pedigree, and they've just looked better throughout the group stage so far, and their metrics really show it. As you can see over here, they're averaging more kills a game. Of course, that alone doesn't matter. But look at that differential. They're averaging 8 more kills than deaths, whereas Rogue here is less than a margin of 3 in that category. And it's kind of similar over here. Mouse Sports is taking an average of 8.3 towers per game and only giving up 3.7. So a really nice differential there. Whereas Rogue is winning an average of 7.3 towers and giving up 5.7. So as you can see, a bit closer there. The column here is tower differential at 15 minutes. So Mouse Sports stronger again here on average. They have one more tower than their opponent 15 minutes into the game. And then this is gold differential 15 minutes into the match. Again, they have about a 2.5K gold lead on their opponents on average 15 minutes in the match, which is quite strong. So no matter how you slice it, Mouse Sports is the superior team here. So I am siding with them in that game if I have to make a pick, even if they are chalk. All right, now it gets interesting with LDLC and BTXL because, like I said, excuse me, I expect that match to essentially be a coin flip when the line comes out. If you're looking at the metrics here, each team has its strengths over their body of work in the group stage, but there's a couple things that I think are really worth focusing on here. So number one, LDLC actually was allowing their opponents more kills than they were getting per game. Of course, kills are not the end all be all, not the only metric we need to look at here, but for DFS purposes, that of course is very important. So what that tells me is that they were playing a lot of close games, which is exactly what happened, and that's what I would expect to happen here. Now, as far as BTXL, they were kind of a tale of two stories. They started this thing out 0-3, kind of looked like garbage, and then they came out the second week, went 4-0, looked like a completely changed team, and were more in line with what people had expected of them. So just for reference sake, I got the data for matches 1-3 and then 4-7. And of course, it's night and day. And over that last 4-game split, they were incredible. About 19 kills a game, only giving up 4 deaths, winning nearly 10 towers and only giving up 3. So they were just annihilating their opponents over that stretch. So on the one hand, I guess you could make the argument that, BTXL, we don't know what we're going to get with them. We could see the team that sucked that first week, and LDLC could steamroll them, right? But that is not the way I'm thinking. First of all, the more recent history showed us that they just reeled off 4 straight wins and looked really good. But more importantly, what that showed me was that BTXL was able to quickly learn from the mistakes that they made against their opponents over the course of only one match and then completely turn the tables on them. So if we're talking about a best of 3 series here, even if BTXL goes down 1 game to LDLC, I do have faith in them to make the necessary adjustments or changes on the fly and turn things around. So that's a really good quality in a best of 3 series. And for that reason, I am leaning towards BTXL in terms of my exposure in my lineups tomorrow. The other thing that I think is worth noting is that I think it's inherently risky to put a lot of your exposure on LDLC, and here's why. They could win this series 2-1, and based on the way their games have been going, BTXL could be almost on par with them for kills. And like I mentioned, BTXL is cheaper, so that may allow you to fit in a stack of 4 Mouse Sports guys, including the captain spot, which is what you may need for an optimal build here. So my point is that even in the event that LDLC do win this series, the performance may not be all that much greater than their opponent BTXL here. And just to kind of illustrate my point, there were 7 games that LDLC won, and here's 4 of them that stood out. This is the kills that LDLC had in the match. This is the kills that their opponent had in the match. This particular game was against Vodafone Giants. And Vodafone Giants lost the match, but they actually had 2 more kills than LDLC. These ones, LDLC had more kills, but they were very close, 14-13, 14-11, 15-11. So again, uh, they just play close matches. That's their nature. That's what the metrics show us here. So that even more so makes me want to just focus on BTXL in terms of my exposure from this match for the most part. All right, let's now go back to this Mouse Sports and Rogue matchup. The other thing I would mention is that this column here is DK points per win. What I did was I went through, I'll actually show you the tab. I went through each team's winning games and then got the DK fantasy point scores from each player and averaged them across those wins. The only thing that this does not include is the 2-point bonuses for 10 assists or 10 kills. So these numbers are just a hair low, but they're still going to work great as a baseline or reference to look at here. So I then took the totals from each team and then combined them right here in this column. So this is the 5 outfield players, so to speak, everyone but the team slot. This is what the team as a whole, those 5 players, averaged in the wins. So pretty much every team was right on par in the mid 140s, again, except LDLC. They're way down here at 124. So that again is another concern for LDLC because they're not putting up a ton of fantasy points in their wins. All right. Now let's go back to the Rogue and Mouse Sports match, and I'm going to run through some specific plays here. The one other thing I would say about Mouse Sports is that they were in this group that was sort of an anomaly before the quarterfinals because they kind of looked like one of the slower paced teams, but that's just because their group was full of teams playing at an incredibly high pace when we're talking about kills plus deaths per game. So on this slate, I do think based on these metrics, they're right in the mix of having the top upside for any winning team. All right. Right now, I have all the players here sorted by the average, so you can just kind of get an idea of where these teams fall. Now, remember, these are the averages and wins only. So I just like to use this when I'm building out stacks because it gives you a good idea. Okay, if this team is able to win, like Rogue, for example, okay, well then we're going to expect Woolite to crush. So again, just keep in mind that these averages are in wins. And then what I like to do when I'm stacking is I will sort this by team here to get an idea of, where are the points going to come from in a win for this team. So like I said, let's start with Mouse Sports here. So Jessica and Lider are kind of in a class of their own in terms of upside. Jessica is the ADC and Lider is the mid. Another interesting note is that the support Promise Q is averaging nearly as much as the jungler Obsess. So I think stacking Promise Q with the ADC Jessica is a must if you're going to play Jessica. And I'm certainly slotting in Promise Q before I worry about getting Obsess in there. And then the kind of bottom of the barrel player for them was Tolkien, the top. So I'm not saying you should avoid him necessarily, but he's not a guy that I'm going to prioritize getting in there from Mouse. All right, moving next to Excel, the other team that I do like here. If you think that Excel is going to win this series, then you really have to think about captaining Deadly, which of course may not be possible salary-wise, but if you can't do that, just getting them in there is the first part of your Excel exposure. And then again, the support, Kasing was averaging nearly 30 points in wins, so he's going to be someone that you certainly want to pair with Deadly. The mid special and the jungler taxer were kind of on par in terms of scoring, so I don't have a huge preference between those two. And then, much like Mouse Sports, the top Sendo was averaging the fewest points in wins. So again, I'm not super keen to focus on jamming him in anywhere. And if it is going to be an XL and Mouse Sports stack, I really have no preference between those two, just based on the scoring that we've seen. Um, let's sort it by position as well. So, oh, we got to get it sorted by points first. All right, there we go. So if we are looking at the scoring for the top position and wins, obviously Saigenda from Rogue stands out head and shoulders above the rest. He was crushing it in terms of his position for wins, and I think it's also worth noting that he had a match where they lost, and he still put up 33 points. So he's someone that you might be able to consider as a one-off in some lineups. And even though I don't expect Rogue to win this series, I think he could still produce, perhaps even at the level of the top from Mouse Sports or Excel. So just something to keep in mind because that scoring does stick out there. As far as supports, obviously there's a strong correlation with how the rest of the team does. So if you're stacking a team, it makes sense to go ahead and throw the support there, especially if you're have the ADC from that team. So no huge preferences there, although the support Yellow Star from LDLC was pretty weak across the board, even in their wins. So in an LC stack, I don't think you necessarily need him. In terms of the mid position, I think Lighter is kind of in a class of his own, especially if it's a Mouse Sports and XL stack. I'm going to lean Lighter just because I do think he has more upside there. At the jungler position, Tinks was great throughout the group stage for LDLC. And he's another player that I think perhaps could produce well enough, even if they end up losing the series. So he could be used as a one-off. However, after him, Taxer and Obsess, I think you can go either way there. I don't have a huge preference between those two. And then finally, if things play out like I have sort of predicted here, and XL and Mouse Sports get the win, I am going to prioritize Deadly over Jessica. Of course, if I can get them both, that'd be great. And I would captain Deadly, particularly because he costs less than Jessica here. All right. I believe that is going to wrap up everything for the coverage of this slate. Like I said, these are best of 3 series now. So I think now that we have some more data from the group stage and these teams are playing a 3-game series, there should be a bit less of that aggressive variance, and things should play out a little bit closer to how the metrics dictate that they should most of the time. So again, if I have to choose, I like Mouse Sports and BTXL here. But of course, I think Rogue is probably going to be the lowest zone, so there could be some merit to playing them in the larger field GPPs at lower ownership, particularly because they do score well in their wins. All right, that wraps it up. Thank you for sticking with me and watching, and until the Wednesday slate, good luck to you.